When the most dangerous man in Chicago stepped forward to defend a desperate waitress, neither of them realized that single moment would ignite a love story that would forever change their worlds. The consequences of his protection would draw her into a life she never imagined, where every choice could mean the difference between salvation and destruction. Drop your city in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Let's dive into the story. But to understand how we arrived at this life-altering moment, we need to go back to where it all began. The lunch rush at Murphy's diner was brutal, and Grazi Martinez was barely keeping her head above water. With her 4-year-old daughter Emma balanced on her hip, she moved between tables with practiced efficiency, serving plates of comfort food to Chicago's working class. The little girl clutched a worn teddy bear and stayed quiet, understanding somehow that Mommy needed her to be good. "Table 6 needs more coffee," barked Jerry, the diner's owner, his face red with frustration. "And I told you before, Martinez, that kid can't be here during rush hour." Grazi's stomach clenched. She'd already lost 3 jobs this year because of Emma. No family to help, no money for daycare, and no other options. "Please, Jerry, she's being good. I don't care if she's being an angel. This is a business, not a daycare center." His voice carried across the diner, drawing stares from customers. "You bring her here again, you're fired. Consider this your final warning." Heat flooded Grazi's cheeks as conversations stopped, and every eye in the place turned toward them. Emma's small hand tightened on her mother's uniform, sensing the tension. The little girl's lower lip trembled, but she remained silent, a heartbreaking display of maturity from someone so young. "I understand," Grazi whispered, her voice barely audible. She couldn't lose this job. Not when rent was due in 3 days and they were already living on ramen noodles and hope. She continued her shift with Emma close by, the child sitting quietly in an empty booth when possible, coloring with crayons Grazi had bought from the dollar store. The lunch crowd gradually thinned, but Grazi's anxiety only grew. How was she going to make this work? How could she keep a job when she had no choice but to bring Emma with her? At 2:30, just as the afternoon lull began, the diner's atmosphere shifted. The bell above the door chimed and 3 men in expensive suits walked in. They moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing everyone else would step aside. The man in the center commanded attention without saying a word. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that seemed to see everything, Bruce Salvatore didn't frequent places like Murphy's Diner. His usual establishments required reservations and served wine that cost more than most people's monthly salary. But today his driver had taken an unexpected route to avoid construction, and Bruce found himself curious about the small neighborhood establishment. They took a booth in the corner, and Bruce watched as the young waitress approached with obvious nervousness. She was beautiful in an understated way, golden brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, green eyes that held determination despite her fatigue, and a genuine smile that seemed rare in his world of calculated expressions. "Good afternoon," Grazi said, pulling out her order pad. "What can I get you gentlemen today?" "Coffee, black," said Tony, Bruce's right-hand man. "Same," added Vincent, the 3rd member of their group. Bruce studied her face. "What do you recommend?" Grazi blinked, surprised by the question. Most customers in expensive suits ordered without consulting the waitress. "The meatloaf is really good, made fresh this morning. And the apple pie, well, it's the best in the neighborhood." "Then I'll have both," Bruce said, his voice calm and measured. There was something about this woman, a strength beneath the obvious exhaustion, that intrigued him. As Grazi hurried away to place their order, Bruce's attention was drawn to a small girl sitting alone in a nearby booth. She couldn't have been more than 4, with dark curls and serious brown eyes, carefully coloring in a book with broken crayons. She was alone but clearly belonged to someone working here. When Grazi returned with their coffee, Bruce asked quietly, "That little girl, she's yours?" Grazi's spine stiffened. "Yes, sir. She's not bothering anyone, I promise. She's very quiet." "She seems like a good kid," Bruce said simply, and watched some of the tension leave the waitress's shoulders. "She is, Emma's. She's everything to me." Bruce nodded, understanding more than she could know about fierce parental love. He'd built an empire partly to protect those he cared about, and he recognized that same protective instinct in this young mother. 20 minutes later, as Bruce was finishing his surprisingly excellent meatloaf, the afternoon peace shattered. Jerry emerged from the kitchen like a storm cloud, his face purple with rage. He'd just received a complaint call from Mrs. Henderson, a regular customer who'd been in during lunch. "Martinez," he bellowed. "Get over here, now!" Every head in the diner turned. Bruce set down his fork slowly, his attention sharpening. "I just got off the phone with Mrs. Henderson," Jerry continued, his voice getting louder. "She says she won't be coming back because we're running a daycare instead of a restaurant. Said it was unprofessional and disgusting to have kids running around where people are trying to eat." Grazi's face went white. "Jerry, please. Emma wasn't running around. She was sitting quietly." "I don't want to hear it." Jerry's voice rose to a shout. "I told you this morning. No kids during business hours. You deliberately disobeyed me, embarrassed me in front of customers, and cost me business." Bruce's men shifted uncomfortably. They'd seen their boss angry before, but there was something different in his expression now. A cold, calculating look that usually preceded very unpleasant consequences for someone. "Please," Grazi's voice cracked slightly. "I don't have anywhere else for her to go. I can't afford daycare, and I don't have family to help. I'll make sure she's even quieter. You won't even know she's here." "You're damn right I won't know she's here because you're fired." Jerry jabbed his finger at her chest. "Clear out your locker and get out, both of you." The words hit Grazi like a physical blow. Her face crumpled for just a moment before she forced herself to stand straighter. "Fine," she said quietly. "But you owe me for today's shift. You cost me customers. You're lucky I don't charge you for damages." Jerry turned to address the entire diner. "Let this be a lesson to everyone else. This is a business, not a charity case." Bruce Salvatore had built his reputation on control. He made calculated decisions, weighed consequences, and never acted on impulse. But watching this young mother's dignity being stripped away in front of her child triggered something primal in him. He stood slowly, his movement drawing every eye in the room. When Bruce Salvatore stood up, people noticed. "Excuse me," his voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Is there a problem here?" Jerry turned, irritation flashing across his face, until he got a good look at Bruce. Something in the man's bearing, the expensive suit, the quiet authority, the way his companions immediately flanked him, made Jerry's belligerence falter. "No problem, sir. Just handling some personnel issues." Bruce's eyes moved from Jerry to Grazi, taking in her proud stance despite the tears threatening to spill, the way she instinctively moved closer to her daughter. "Personnel issues," he repeated softly. "I see." He pulled out his wallet and placed $500 bills on the table. "This should cover our meal and leave a generous tip for the excellent service." Jerry's eyes widened at the money. That's very generous, sir." "Miss Martinez provided exceptional service," Bruce continued, his voice carrying clearly through the silent diner. "Professional, courteous, and attentive, the kind of employee any establishment would be fortunate to have." Grazi stared at him in shock. Why was this stranger defending her? Bruce turned his full attention to Jerry. "It seems to me that a single mother working multiple jobs to support her child demonstrates exactly the kind of work ethic and determination most employers would value." His tone remained conversational, but there was steel underneath. "Perhaps you should reconsider your decision." Jerry's face flushed red again, but something in Bruce's expression made him hesitate. "Sir, with respect, this is my business. I make the personnel decisions." "Of course," Bruce agreed smoothly, "and I make decisions about where to bring my business associates for meetings." He glanced around the diner meaningfully. Word travels quickly in the business community about which establishments understand hospitality and which don't. The implied threat hung in the air. Jerry might not know exactly who Bruce was, but he understood that crossing someone with this kind of presence and resources could be very bad for business. For a long moment, the diner was absolutely silent. Even little Emma seemed to sense the importance of the moment, watching with wide eyes as these adult forces swirled around her mother. But Jerry's pride and embarrassment outweighed his business sense. "My decision stands," he said stubbornly. "She's fired." Bruce nodded once, as if this was exactly what he'd expected. "Very well." He turned to Grazi, who was still standing frozen in shock. "Miss Martinez, would you mind if I had a word with you outside?" Outside Murphy's diner, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Grazi held Emma's hand tightly, her mind racing. What did this stranger want with her? Why had he defended her in there? And why did he look like he could buy and sell the entire block without blinking? "Thank you," she said finally, her voice small. "You didn't have to do that." Bruce studied her face, noting the way she held herself, proud despite her circumstances, protective of her daughter, wary but not hostile. "What's your full name?" "Grazi Martinez." She shifted Emma to her other hip. "This is Emma." "Hello, Emma," Bruce said softly, and the little girl offered him a shy smile. He'd always been good with children, something that surprised people who only knew his professional reputation. "Grazi Martinez," he repeated, the name rolling off his tongue easily. "Tell me, what other jobs do you have?" The question caught her off guard. Why do you want to know?" "Because I'm considering offering you one." Grazi's breath caught. "Sir, I don't even know your name." "Bruce Salvatore." He handed her a business card. Thick, expensive stock with only a name and phone number. "And before you ask, yes, this is a legitimate job offer." She looked at the card, then back at his face, searching for some sign of what he really wanted. Men like him didn't just offer jobs to waitresses they'd known for 30 minutes. "What kind of job?" "I need someone to manage my household staff, coordinate schedules, handle supplies, oversee daily operations." Bruce's voice was matter-of-fact. "The pay is $8,000 a month, plus full health insurance and housing if you need it." Grazi's legs nearly gave out. $8,000 a month was more than she'd made in the past 6 months combined. "I said that's not possible. People don't just—" "I do," Bruce said simply. "The position requires someone trustworthy, hard-working, and capable of managing multiple responsibilities. Based on what I observed in there, you qualify." "You don't know anything about me." Bruce's expression grew serious. "I know you're a single mother working multiple jobs to support your child. I know you handled that humiliation with grace and dignity. I know your daughter is well-behaved and obviously loved." He paused. "And I know you need help." The honesty of that last statement hit Grazi like a punch to the chest. She did need help, desperately, but this felt too good to be true, and in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked directly. "Nobody offers jobs like this to strangers. What's the catch?" A smile tugged at the corner of Bruce's mouth. In his world, people rarely questioned his offers so directly. Most were too intimidated or too eager for his money to ask uncomfortable questions. "The catch is that my life is complicated. The household I'm asking you to manage comes with certain security considerations." "Security considerations?" "I have enemies," Bruce said simply. "People who would hurt those around me to get to me. Anyone in my employ needs to understand that risk." Grazi felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you talking about physical danger?" "I'm talking about being part of a world where caution is necessary." Bruce's voice remained steady. Complete honesty. "I'm not a conventional businessman. I deal with people and situations that require discretion and security measures most people never encounter." The words hung between them, loaded with implication. Grazi wasn't naive. She'd grown up in neighborhoods where everyone knew which businesses were fronts and which men commanded respect, through means other than charm and good intentions. She was beginning to understand what kind of offer this really was. "You're connected," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Bruce inclined his head slightly. "That's one way to put it." Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, I'm hungry." The simple statement brought the conversation back to reality. Grazi looked down at her daughter, beautiful, innocent, deserving of so much more than constant struggle and uncertainty. Then she looked back at Bruce Salvatore, this dangerous stranger offering her a lifeline. "If I said yes," she said carefully, "what exactly would my responsibilities be?" "Manage my household staff, cleaning service, catering for business dinners, maintenance scheduling, coordinate my personal calendar, handle correspondence that doesn't require my direct attention." Bruce's tone was professional. "You'd work normal business hours Monday through Friday, weekends off unless there's a special event, and you'd be compensated extra for that." "And Emma?" "There's an excellent daycare center 10 minutes from my home. Full-time care, educational programs." Bruce's expression softened slightly. "She'd be safe, well cared for, and you'd never have to choose between your job and your daughter again." Tears pricked at the corners of Grazi's eyes. The offer was everything she'd dreamed of, but never dared hope for. "Why me?" she whispered. "Really, why me?" Bruce was quiet for a moment, thinking of his own son who lived across the country with his ex-wife, thinking of all the times he'd wished someone had shown him kindness when he'd needed it most. "Because sometimes people deserve a chance," he said finally. "And because I have a feeling you won't disappoint me." Tony appeared at Bruce's shoulder. "Boss, we need to move. You have that meeting in 20 minutes. Bruce nodded without taking his eyes off Grazi. I need an answer now. My driver will take you home to collect your things if you say yes. You can start Monday. Grazi's mind raced. Every rational thought screamed that this was dangerous, that she was getting involved with something she didn't understand. But Emma's hand in hers was small and trusting, and the rent notice in her purse was red and final. If I'm not comfortable with something you ask me to do, can I say no? Yes. And if you ever want to leave, you can. I'm not in the business of keeping people against their will. She looked into his eyes, searching for deception and finding only steady honesty. In her world, she'd learned to trust her instincts about people, and everything about Bruce Salvatore suggested danger, power and complexity, but not cruelty. Okay, she said quietly. Yes. Bruce smiled, and for a moment he looked less like an intimidating businessman and more like someone who understood what it meant to take a chance on hope. Vincent will drive you home. Pack what you need for the next few days. I'll have movers handle the rest of your belongings tomorrow. Where will we be living? My guest house, 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, completely private. Bruce handed her another card. My home address. Vincent knows the way. As a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb, Grazi felt like she was stepping off a cliff into unknown territory. But Emma's delighted giggle at the sight of the fancy car reminded her that sometimes jumping was the only way forward. Miss Martinez, Bruce said as Vincent opened the car door. Welcome to your new life. As the sedan pulled away with her and Emma inside, Bruce watched until it disappeared around the corner. Tony and Bruce walked toward their own car, a modified Escalade with bulletproof windows and reinforced panels. You sure about this, boss? Tony asked quietly. Getting involved with civilians? Bruce considered the question. She's not just any civilian. There's something about her. Strength, loyalty. Those are qualities I value. And if she runs when she figures out who we really are, then she runs, Bruce said simply, but I don't think she will. As they drove through Chicago's afternoon traffic, Bruce found himself thinking about Grazi Martinez's fierce protectiveness of her daughter, the way she'd faced humiliation with dignity, the directness of her questions when she could have just been grateful and quiet. In his business, loyalty was everything, and it usually had to be bought or earned through fear. But sometimes, just sometimes, it started with kindness. The Salvatore estate sat behind imposing iron gates on Chicago's North Shore, where old money and new power intersected. As Vincent's sedan wound up the circular drive, Grazi pressed her face to the window in amazement. The main house was a masterpiece of stone and timber, with manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than she'd ever made in a year. "Mama, it's like a castle," Emma whispered, her small hands pressed against the glass. Vincent glanced in the rearview mirror and smiled. "Wait until you see the inside, little one." He pulled up to a smaller building set back from the main house, a charming 2-story guest cottage with flower boxes and a wraparound porch. It looked like something from a magazine, complete with white picket fence and rose bushes. "This is yours," Vincent said, getting out to open their door. "Mr. Salvatore had it prepared for you." Grazi stepped out slowly, Emma's hand clutched tightly in hers. The cottage was beautiful, but the wrongness of the situation hit her again. Normal employers didn't give their household managers accommodation like this. Normal employers didn't have drivers and security details. "Miss Martinez?" A woman emerged from the cottage's front door, elderly, grey-haired, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I'm Mrs. Chen, Mr. Salvatore's housekeeper. I've prepared everything for your arrival." The interior of the cottage made Grazi's breath catch. Hardwood floors gleamed beneath expensive rugs. The furniture was tasteful and comfortable, a far cry from the second-hand pieces she'd been making do with. The kitchen sparkled with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances she'd only ever seen in cooking shows. "The master bedroom is upstairs," Mrs. Chen explained, leading them on a tour. "And this," she opened a door to reveal a child's paradise, "is for Emma." The little girl gasped. The room was painted in soft pastels, with a twin bed covered in stuffed animals, a bookshelf full of children's books, and a toy chest overflowing with age-appropriate treasures. There was even a small desk with crayons and coloring books. Mr. Salvatore thought Emma might enjoy having her own space, Mrs. Chen said softly, watching the child's wonder with obvious pleasure. Grazi felt tears threaten again. In one afternoon, her daughter had gone from coloring with broken crayons in a diner booth to having a room that most children could only dream of. "This is too much," she whispered. "Mr. Salvatore believes in taking care of his people," Mrs. Chen replied. "And that includes their families." She handed Grazi a folder. Your schedule for next week, contact information for the daycare center, and a household credit card for any immediate expenses. Grazi stared at the plastic card bearing her name. The credit limit made her dizzy. "I can't possibly need access to this much money." Mr. Salvatore prefers his employees to have what they need, without having to ask, Mrs. Chen said practically. "Dinner is at 6 if you'd like to join us in the main house. Otherwise, the refrigerator here is fully stocked." After Mrs. Chen left, Grazi sank onto the cottage's sofa, overwhelmed. Emma was upstairs playing happily with her new toys, her delighted laughter floating down from her bedroom. In the space of 4 hours, their entire lives had changed. Her phone rang, an unknown number. "Hello? Miss Martinez, this is Bruce. Are you settling in comfortably?" His voice was warm, professional, but underneath she caught something else. Concern. "Yes, everything is beautiful, too beautiful. Too. Mr. Salvatore, I need to understand what I'm really doing here." "You're managing my household," Bruce said simply. "Household managers don't get guest cottages and credit cards with no limits." Bruce was quiet for a moment. "Walk with me," he said finally. "I'm on the main terrace behind the house." "Bring Emma." Grazi found him 20 minutes later, standing on a stone terrace that overlooked Lake Michigan. The view was spectacular. Endless blue water stretching to the horizon, private beach below, gardens that belonged in European palaces. Emma ran toward the lawn immediately, chasing butterflies. "Do you have questions?" Bruce said without preamble. "I have concerns," Grazi corrected. "This level of generosity comes with expectations, and I need to know what they are." Bruce studied her profile as she watched Emma play. "What do you think I expect?" "I don't know, and that's what worries me." She turned to face him directly. "In my experience, men don't give women they've just met everything they've ever wanted without expecting something in return. And what do you think I want in return?" Grazi's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze steadily. "I'm hoping you want an employee. I'm worried you want something else." Bruce's expression grew serious. "I want an employee, period. Someone I can trust to handle the details of my life so I can focus on business. Someone who understands discretion and loyalty." He paused. "The generosity isn't about expecting favors. It's about ensuring you have no reason to look elsewhere for what you need." Meaning? Meaning if you're worried about money, you might make poor decisions. If you're comfortable, secure, well compensated, then your focus can be entirely on doing your job well. It was a logical explanation, but Grazi sensed there was more to it. "And if your business associates or rivals notice you're taking exceptional care of me, what does that make me in their eyes?" The question impressed Bruce. Most people wouldn't think beyond the immediate benefits to consider the implications. "It makes you someone under my protection," he said quietly, "which means no one with any sense will bother you. And people without sense are why I have security measures in place." Emma came running over, breathless and laughing. "Mama, can we live here forever? There are fountains and roses, and I saw a bunny." Grazi smoothed her daughter's hair. "We'll see, baby." "Emma," Bruce said, crouching down to her level, "would you like to see something special?" The little girl nodded eagerly. Bruce led them along a garden path to a small gazebo where several cats lounged in the afternoon sun. Emma squealed with delight as a particularly friendly tabby approached her. "They keep the gardens free of mice," Bruce explained to Grazi, "but mostly they're here because they needed a home." Watching her daughter giggle as the cats rubbed against her legs, Grazi felt something shift inside her chest. Bruce Salvatore was dangerous. She could sense it in the way he moved, in the deference of his employees, in the casual mention of enemies and security measures. But he was also a man who rescued stray cats and created magical bedrooms for little girls he'd just met. "Mr. Salvatore," she said quietly, "what kind of business are you in exactly?" Bruce was quiet for a long moment, watching Emma play. "Import and export," he said finally. "Transportation and logistics. Some real estate development. All technically true," Grazi suspected, but not the complete picture. "And the dangerous part? Some of my business partners prefer to handle disagreements through intimidation rather than negotiation," Bruce said carefully. "Some of my competitors would prefer to eliminate competition rather than compete fairly. In that environment, caution becomes necessity." Emma ran back to them, the friendly tabby in her arms. "Mama, can we keep him?" "Sweetheart, he lives here. He belongs with the other cats." "But he likes me," Bruce smiled. Maybe you could visit him every day, take care of him while you live here. Really? Emma's eyes went wide. Really? What would you like to name him? As Emma chattered about names for her new feline friend, Grazi found herself watching Bruce's face. There was genuine warmth in his expression as he listened to her daughter's excited planning. Whatever else he might be, his kindness toward Emma seemed real. Miss Martinez, he said as they walked back toward the cottage, tomorrow morning Mrs. Chen will orient you to the household systems. Monday you'll start your regular schedule. If you have any concerns or questions about anything at all, you call me directly. And if I decide this isn't right for us. Bruce stopped walking and looked at her seriously. Then you tell me, and I'll help you transition to something that is. But I hope you'll give it a chance. I think this could work well for both of us. That evening, as Grazi tucked Emma into her new bed surrounded by stuffed animals and fairy tale books, her daughter looked up at her with sleepy contentment. I like it here, Mama. I know, baby. Do you like Mr. Bruce? Grazi considered the question. Did she like Bruce Salvatore? He was mysterious, clearly dangerous, and had turned their lives upside down in a single day. He was also the first person in years who'd treated her with genuine respect, who'd seen her worth and acted on it without expecting anything in return. I think he's a good man who lives in a complicated world, she said finally. What's complicated mean? It means sometimes people have to make difficult choices to protect the people they care about. Emma nodded as if this made perfect sense. Like when you work 2 jobs so we can have food. Exactly like that. As Grazi turned off the lights and headed to her own room, she found herself standing at the window that looked out over the estate's grounds. Security lights illuminated the gardens and drives, and she could see figures moving in the distance, guards making their rounds. For the first time in years, she and Emma were safe, comfortable and secure. But as she fell asleep in luxury sheets in a room that cost more to furnish than her annual income, Grazi couldn't shake the feeling that she'd crossed a line into a world where safety came with a price she didn't yet understand. Outside, Bruce stood on his own balcony, looking toward the guest cottage where soft light glowed in an upstairs window. He'd made a decision today based on instinct rather than calculation, and his advisors would probably question his judgment. But watching Grazi Martinez defend her dignity and protect her daughter had reminded him of something he'd almost forgotten. Sometimes the strongest people were the ones fighting quiet battles no one else could see. Grazi's first week managing Bruce's household passed in a whirlwind of organized chaos. The man's life ran with military precision, but the scale of operations was staggering. Phone calls from associates in 3 different time zones, catered business meetings that required security clearance for service staff, and a social calendar that read like a who's who of Chicago's power elite. Mrs. Chen proved invaluable, guiding Grazi through systems that had been refined over years of handling Bruce's complex requirements. Mr. Salvatore values efficiency above all else, the older woman explained as they coordinated a dinner party for Friday evening. He doesn't like surprises, delays, or excuses, but he's fair, generous, and protective of his people. His people. Anyone who works for him becomes family of sorts. He takes care of family. Grazi was beginning to understand what that meant. The household staff was paid well above market rates, received excellent benefits, and seemed genuinely content with their positions. More telling, she'd noticed that several employees had been with Bruce for over a decade, unusual loyalty in domestic service. On Wednesday, she encountered her first test. Vincent approached her during the afternoon with obvious concern. Miss Martinez, we have a problem with Friday's dinner. One of the guests just added 3 people to his party without notice. We need to adjust seating, catering quantities, and security clearance for the additional attendees. In her previous jobs, this kind of last-minute change would have meant scrambling frantically and probably disappointing someone. Here, she had resources. Get me the caterer on the phone, Grazi said calmly. I'll handle the additional food and service staff. You coordinate with security about the new guests and I'll redesign the seating arrangement. 2 hours later, everything was resolved. The caterer was happy to accommodate with the premium fees Bruce's account commanded. The additional security clearances were expedited through connections Grazi didn't question, and the new seating arrangement actually improved the evening's dynamics by separating 2 guests who'd been feuding over a recent business deal. When Bruce returned home that evening, Vincent briefed him on the day's crisis and resolution. Bruce found Grazi in the cottage, helping Emma with a puzzle at the kitchen table. I hear we had some excitement today, he said, accepting her offer of coffee. Nothing that couldn't be handled, Grazi replied, though she felt a surge of pride at having managed her first real test successfully. Vincent says, you resolved everything within 2 hours and improved the overall event planning in the process. I've been organizing chaos my whole life, she said with a smile, just usually with a smaller budget. Bruce laughed, a real laugh that transformed his entire face. I knew I made the right choice. Emma looked up from her puzzle. Mr. Bruce, do you want to help us? It's a picture of butterflies. I'd be honored, Bruce said solemnly, pulling up a chair next to the 4-year-old. Watching this powerful, dangerous man carefully sorting puzzle pieces by color, while Emma chatted about her day at the new daycare center. Grazi felt something warm and unsettling bloom in her chest. There were 2 sides to Bruce Salvatore, the cold businessman who commanded respect through unspoken threats, and the gentle man who'd spent 20 minutes the previous evening reading bedtime stories to her daughter in different silly voices. Mama, can Mr. Bruce stay for dinner? Emma asked hopefully. Mr. Bruce is probably very busy, sweetheart. Actually, Bruce said, glancing at Grazi, I don't have any plans this evening, if you don't mind the company. They ordered pizza, Bruce's suggestion, much to Emma's delight. As they ate, Grazi found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. The conversation was easy, ranging from Emma's new favorite books to Grazi's observations about managing household logistics to Bruce's stories about traveling for business. Where's your favorite place you've been? Grazi asked. Tuscany, Bruce said immediately. There's a small village called Montepulciano where time moves differently. The people there understand what's important. Family, good food, taking care of each other. Do you have family there? Something shifted in Bruce's expression. My grandfather immigrated from that region in the 1920s. I went back a few years ago to see the family homestead. He paused. It's still there, still owned by distant cousins who welcomed me like a long-lost son. That must have been amazing. It was, Bruce said quietly. It was also when I realized how far I'd drifted from the values he tried to instill in me. The admission hung in the air, loaded with meaning Grazi didn't fully understand, but recognized as significant. This wasn't casual dinner conversation. This was Bruce Salvatore sharing something real and vulnerable. After Emma went to bed, Bruce lingered on the cottage's front porch, seemingly reluctant to return to the main house. Can I ask you something? Grazi said, settling into the porch swing beside him. Always. Why did you really help me that day at the diner? Bruce was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. You reminded me of someone, he said finally. Who? My mother. His voice was soft. She died when I was 12. Before that, she worked 3 jobs trying to keep us afloat after my father was... After he died, she had this incredible dignity, even when people looked down on her for being a poor widow with a kid. I'm sorry. She would have liked you, Bruce continued, would have admired your strength, your determination to protect Emma no matter what. What happened to her? Cancer. We couldn't afford the treatment that might have saved her. Bruce's jaw tightened. I swore then that I'd never be powerless to protect the people I cared about again. The pieces clicked into place for Grazi. That's why you do what you do. For power. Power to protect, Bruce corrected. Power to ensure the people under my care never have to choose between dignity and survival. It was a compelling justification, and Grazi could hear the truth in it, but she could also hear the cost. What about the people who aren't under your care? What about the people who get hurt so you can maintain that power? Bruce turned to look at her directly. Are you asking if I'm a good man, Miss Martinez? The formal address was deliberate, a reminder of the distance between their worlds, but Grazi didn't back down. I'm asking if you can live with the choices you make. Some days better than others, Bruce admitted. But yes, I can live with protecting my people, even if it means making enemies of those who would hurt them. And if those enemies come for me, for Emma, Bruce's expression grew cold and deadly serious, then they'll discover why my protection is valued so highly in this city. A chill ran down Grazi's spine, not from fear of him, but from recognition of what he was capable of. Has that ever happened before? Have your employees been targeted? Once, Bruce said quietly. A rival family thought they could pressure me by threatening my accountant's daughter. They were mistaken. What happened? The accountant and his family were relocated to a beautiful home in San Diego with full security. The rival family learned why such tactics are considered poor business practice. Grazi didn't ask for details. She suspected she didn't want to know. And if I want to leave, if this becomes too much, then you leave, Bruce said simply. No threats, No pressure, no consequences. You'll have my protection, regardless of whether you work for me. Why? Bruce stood, his silhouette imposing against the security lights. Because once you're under my protection, Miss Martinez, you stay under my protection. That's what family means. As he walked back toward the main house, Grazi remained on the swing, processing everything she'd learned. Bruce Salvatore was exactly as dangerous as she'd suspected, a man who'd built his empire on violence and intimidation. But he was also a man driven by love and loss, someone who understood powerlessness and had dedicated his life to never experiencing it again. The question was whether she could accept the protection he offered without compromising her own moral compass. Because despite her growing feelings for this complex, contradictory man, she was beginning to understand that working for Bruce Salvatore meant accepting that safety came with blood on it. Inside the main house, Bruce stood at his office window, watching the lights in the guest cottage. He'd shared more with Grazi Martinez tonight than he had with anyone in years. She asked the right questions, pushed back when necessary, and somehow made him want to be the man she saw when she looked at him. It was dangerous, this growing attachment. In his world, caring about someone meant painting a target on their back. But as he thought about Emma's laughter during dinner and Grazi's steady strength in everything she did, Bruce found himself willing to accept that risk. Some things, he was discovering, were worth protecting regardless of the cost. The dinner party on Friday evening was Grazi's first real glimpse into Bruce's business world. She'd coordinated every detail flawlessly. 12 guests, 5 courses, wine pairings that complemented both the food and the carefully orchestrated conversations. But it was the guest list that made her understand exactly what kind of business Bruce was really in. Chicago's most prominent defense attorney sat next to a city councilman whose vote had mysteriously swung in favor of several development projects. The police commissioner's wife charmed a federal judge whose son worked for one of Bruce's construction companies, and the man everyone deferred to with careful respect was introduced simply as Mr. Torino, though Grazi recognized the name from newspaper headlines about organized crime investigations. She moved through the evening like a ghost, ensuring water glasses stayed full and courses appeared seamlessly, while listening to conversations that danced around illegal activities with the skill of professional politicians. No one said anything explicitly incriminating, but the implications were clear to anyone paying attention. The shipping union has been much more cooperative lately, one guest mentioned casually. I understand their previous concerns about workplace safety have been resolved. Sometimes people just need the right incentive to see reason, Bruce replied smoothly. Amazing how quickly safety issues disappear when the right resources are applied. After the last guest departed, Grazi helped Mrs. Chen coordinate the cleanup, while Bruce disappeared into his office with Vincent and Tony. She was folding linen napkins when raised voices echoed from the closed office door. Not the time for complications, Tony's voice carried. The Torino situation is delicate enough without... Understand the risks. Bruce's voice was controlled but firm. But the decision is made. Civilian involvement compromises everything we've built. The voices dropped too low for her to make out individual words, but the tension was unmistakable. Grazi finished her tasks quickly and retreated to the cottage, but sleep proved impossible. Whatever Torino situation they'd been discussing, it was causing serious concern among Bruce's inner circle. Saturday morning, Emma woke up with a fever and cough that had Grazi worried enough to call the pediatrician. When she explained the situation to Mrs. Chen, the older woman immediately offered to drive them to the doctor's appointment. Mr. Salvatore left strict instructions that you and Emma are to receive any medical care you need immediately, Mrs. Chen explained as they bundled the sick child into the car. Dr. Patterson is expecting you. Dr. Patterson's office was in one of Chicago's most exclusive medical buildings, and Emma received the kind of thorough, unhurried attention that Grazi had never been able to afford before. The diagnosis was a minor respiratory infection that would respond well to antibiotics and rest. Children bounce back quickly from these things, Dr. Patterson assured Grazi as he handed her the prescription. But I want to see her again in 5 days to make sure everything's clearing up. As they left the medical building, Grazi noticed the black sedan that had been parked across from Bruce's estate was now parked across from the medical complex. When they stopped for lunch, the same sedan appeared in a nearby parking spot. By the time they returned home, she was certain they were being followed. Emma was napping peacefully when Bruce returned that evening. Grazi met him at the front door of the cottage, her concern evident. "We were followed today," she said without preamble. "Black sedan, tinted windows. They tracked us to the doctor's office and to lunch." Bruce's expression went cold and deadly. "You're certain?" "I'm certain. Same car, same parking pattern at 3 different locations." He pulled out his phone and made a brief call. "Tony, we have a problem. The Martinez situation has attracted attention." A pause. "No, they're fine, but someone is conducting surveillance." Another pause. "Understood." He hung up and turned his full attention to Grazi. "You did exactly the right thing by telling me immediately. From now on, you don't go anywhere without Vincent or one of my other drivers." "Bruce, if Emma and I are putting you in danger—" "You're not putting me in danger," he said firmly. "But my world is apparently putting you in danger, which is unacceptable. Who would be watching us?" Bruce was quiet for a moment, calculating how much to tell her. "Potentially several parties. Business rivals looking for leverage. Federal investigators building surveillance profiles. Other families testing my security measures." "Federal investigators?" Grazi's voice rose. "Are we talking about the FBI?" "We are talking about people who want to understand my operations and think you might provide insight into my personal life." The implications hit her like a physical blow. "You're under federal investigation." "I'm under federal scrutiny," Bruce corrected. "There's a difference." "Not to me." Grazi stepped back from him. "My daughter is 4 years old, Bruce. I can't have FBI surveillance in her life. Which is why we're going to resolve this situation quickly and permanently." "How?" Bruce's smile was cold and predatory. "By making it very clear that investigating my household staff is hazardous to one's health and career." The casual way he spoke about threatening federal agents terrified her more than anything else that had happened. "You can't threaten the FBI." "I don't threaten anyone," Bruce said quietly. "I simply ensure that certain information reaches certain people, and they make their own choices about how to proceed." "What kind of information?" "The kind that ruins careers and destroys reputations. The kind that reminds federal employees why discretion is so highly valued in law enforcement circles." Grazi stared at him, finally understanding the full scope of what she'd gotten involved in. This wasn't just a man with connections to organized crime. This was someone with enough power and information to threaten federal investigations. "I need to think," she said quietly, "about whether this is the right situation for Emma and me." Something flickered in Bruce's eyes, hurt, perhaps, or disappointment, but his voice remained steady. "Of course, take all the time you need, but while you're deciding, you stay here where I can protect you both. And if I decide to leave, then I'll help you relocate somewhere safe and ensure you have the resources to start over wherever you choose," Bruce said without hesitation. "But Grazi, I need you to understand something. The moment you became part of my household, you became visible to people who might try to use you against me. That doesn't change whether you work for me or not." The weight of that statement settled over her like lead. There was no going back to her old life now. She'd crossed a line into Bruce Salvatore's world, and that crossing had permanent consequences. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the safest place for you and Emma is under my protection, working for me, where I can control the variables and eliminate threats before they become problems." Bruce stepped closer, his voice gentle but implacable. "I'm saying that whether you stay or go, you're part of my world now, and I protect what's mine." That night, after Emma's fever had broken and the little girl was sleeping peacefully, Grazi stood at her bedroom window, watching security patrols make their rounds. She'd come here seeking safety and stability for her daughter. Instead, she'd discovered that safety in Bruce's world came with a price she was only beginning to understand. But as she thought about her alternatives, returning to minimum-wage jobs and constant struggle, always wondering if someone might use her connection to Bruce against him, she realized that maybe she'd already made her choice. Some bridges once crossed couldn't be uncrossed. Some protections once accepted couldn't be refused. And some men, once they'd claimed you as family, never let you go. The question was whether that was a promise or a threat. The resolution to the surveillance problem came swifter and more decisively than Grazi had expected. By Monday morning, the black sedan was gone, and Vincent informed her that they'd received word that the federal task force had been reassigned to more pressing matters. She didn't ask for details. She was learning that in Bruce's world, some questions were better left unasked, but the incident had shifted something fundamental between them. Where before she'd been an employee with special consideration, now she was clearly under Bruce's active protection. The difference showed in small ways: additional security checks, modified routes for even routine errands, and the way Bruce's men treated her with the same deference they showed him. "You're adapting well," Mrs. Chen observed as they planned a business brunch for Wednesday. "Many people find Mr. Salvatore's world overwhelming at first." "I'm still finding it overwhelming," Grazi admitted. "I just don't have the luxury of falling apart." "That's what makes you perfect for him," the older woman said with a knowing smile. "Mr. Salvatore has always been drawn to strength. His late wife was the same way, faced everything head-on, never backed down from what needed to be done." It was the first time anyone had mentioned Bruce's wife directly. "What happened to her?" Mrs. Chen's expression grew sad. "Car accident 3 years ago. She was driving back from visiting her sister in Milwaukee when a truck ran a red light." She paused. "Mr. Salvatore blamed himself, of course. Said if she'd been in one of his armored vehicles instead of her own car, she might have survived." The information explained so much about Bruce's protective instincts, his insistence on security measures that seemed excessive for routine activities. "That's why he's so careful now. That's why he's so careful with people he cares about," Mrs. Chen corrected gently. That evening, Emma was having dinner with Bruce in the main dining room, a routine that had developed over the past 2 weeks. Grazi found them at the massive mahogany table. Emma perched on a stack of pillows in an ornate chair, chattering about her day, while Bruce listened with complete attention. "And then Marcus said his dad takes him fishing. But I said my Mr. Bruce is too important for fishing, but maybe he likes fishing too." Bruce's eyes met Grazi's over Emma's head. "I love fishing," he said seriously. "I haven't been in a long time, but I used to go with my grandfather when I was about your age." "Really? Can we go fishing sometime? If your mama says it's okay, I'd be honored to take you fishing." Emma turned to Grazi with pleading eyes. "Can we, Mama? Please?" "We'll see," Grazi said, but she was smiling. Watching Bruce with her daughter never failed to amaze her. This man, who could apparently threaten federal agents and make problems disappear, was endlessly patient with a 4-year-old's questions and demands. After Emma went to bed, Bruce found Grazi on the cottage's back deck, enjoying the evening air. The security lights illuminated the gardens, and in the distance she could see the lake reflecting the city's glow. "Thank you," she said as he joined her on the deck. "For what?" "For being so good to her. Emma hasn't had many positive male role models in her life." "What about her father?" Grazi was quiet for a long moment. She'd avoided this topic, but Bruce had shared his painful history with her. Perhaps it was time to reciprocate. "Emma's father was my college boyfriend. When I told him I was pregnant, he gave me money for an abortion and told me he'd deny paternity if I kept the baby." Bruce's expression darkened. "I'm sorry. I don't regret my choice. Emma is the best thing that's ever happened to me. But watching her with you," Grazi's voice grew soft, "you show her what a good man looks like, how a man should treat people he cares about. She's easy to care about. She's got her mother's spirit. And what do you see when you look at her mother?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications they'd both been dancing around for weeks. Bruce moved closer until she could feel the warmth of his body beside her. "I see the strongest woman I've ever met," he said quietly. "I see someone who's faced impossible choices and somehow maintained her integrity through all of it. I see someone who makes me want to be better than I am. Bruce, I see someone I'm falling in love with, even though I know I shouldn't be." The admission stole her breath. She'd felt the attraction growing between them, had caught him looking at her with something deeper than professional interest. But hearing him say it out loud changed everything. "You shouldn't be," she agreed softly. "It complicates everything." "I know." His hand found hers in the darkness. "But I can't seem to help myself. Your world is dangerous. My world is what it is. But with you and Emma in it, it feels like something worth protecting instead of just something I'm trapped in." Grazi turned to face him fully. In the security lighting, his face was half in shadow, but she could see the vulnerability in his expression. This powerful, dangerous man was offering her his heart, and they both knew how much that cost him. "If we do this," she said carefully, "if we become something more than employer and employee, what does that mean for Emma? For our safety?" "It means you become the most protected woman in Chicago," Bruce said without hesitation. "It means anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through me first. It means Emma grows up knowing she's safe, loved, and that she'll never want for anything." "And what do I give you in return?" Bruce's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You give me something I thought I'd lost forever. You give me a reason to come home at night. You give me a future that looks like more than just business and obligation." The honesty in his voice broke down her last defenses. She'd been fighting this attraction for weeks, telling herself it was impossible, dangerous, wrong. But sitting here with his hand in hers, looking into eyes that held nothing but sincerity, she realized she'd already made her choice. "Bruce," she whispered, and that was all the invitation he needed. He kissed her softly, carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. When they separated, both were breathing unsteadily. "This changes everything," she said. "Yes, it does." Bruce's forehead rested against hers. "Are you ready for everything to change?" Grazi thought about her old life, the constant struggle, the fear, the exhaustion of fighting every battle alone. Then she thought about Emma's laughter echoing through the estate's gardens, the security of knowing they were protected, and the way Bruce looked at both of them like they were the most important things in his world. "Yes," she said quietly, "I'm ready." News of their relationship spread through Bruce's organization with the efficiency of a military communication network. Grazi first became aware of the shift when Vincent started addressing her as Mrs. Martinez with a subtle but unmistakable deference, and when Tony began including her in security briefings about household protocols. "Word travels fast," she commented to Bruce over breakfast Tuesday morning, "especially when that word involves the boss's personal life." Bruce replied with amusement, "Are you having second thoughts?" "No, but I'm realizing I don't understand the implications. What does this mean for how people see me, how they interact with me?" Bruce set down his coffee cup and gave her his full attention. "It means you're family now, not just an employee. It means when people look at you, they see an extension of my authority and protection. It means your word carries weight in this organization, and the responsibilities that come with that: loyalty, discretion, understanding that our relationship affects not just us, but everyone who works for me." Bruce reached across the table to take her hand. "It also means that if anyone disrespects you, they're disrespecting me, and that has consequences." The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a mantle. She was no longer just Grazi Martinez, struggling single mother. She was Bruce Salvatore's woman, and in his world that carried implications she was still learning to navigate. Her first test came that afternoon, during a business meeting Bruce was hosting in his home office. She was coordinating refreshments when she overheard one of his associates, a man named Castellano, making crude comments about Bruce's taste in help. "Always did like them young and grateful," Castellano was saying to his companion. "Amazing what a desperate woman will do for security." Grazi felt her face burn, but she continued setting up the coffee service professionally. She'd dealt with worse from customers and employers before, but Vincent, who'd also overheard, stepped forward with cold authority. "Mr. Castellano, I think you may have misunderstood something about Miss Martinez's position in this household." "Position?" Castellano smirked. "I think I understand her position perfectly." "Then you understand that disrespecting her is the same as disrespecting Mr. Salvatore directly," Vincent said quietly, "and you understand what Mr. Salvatore does to people who disrespect him." The color drained from Castellano's face. "I didn't mean, you were just leaving." Bruce's voice came from the doorway. He'd obviously heard enough of the exchange. "Permanently. Bruce, come on, we've been doing business for 5 years. And now we're not." Bruce's tone was arctic. "Vincent will escort you out. Don't come back." After Castellano left, Vincent approached Grazi with genuine concern. "I apologize for his behavior, Mrs. Martinez. It won't happen again." "Thank you," she said quietly. "But I could have handled it." "I know you could have," Vincent replied with a slight smile, "but that's not how family works here. We protect each other." That evening, Bruce found her in the cottage kitchen, preparing dinner with unusual intensity. She was chopping vegetables with more force than necessary, her movements sharp with suppressed emotion. "Talk to me," he said, leaning against the counter. "Is that what people think? That I'm just some desperate woman who traded sex for security?" Bruce moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Some people think that. Those people are wrong, and they learn quickly not to voice such opinions. But there's truth in it, isn't there?" Grazi set down the knife and turned to face him. "I was desperate. I did need security, and now I'm sleeping with the man who provided both. Is that what you think happened here? I think I need to know that this is real. Bruce, that you're not just protecting me because you feel sorry for me, or because you enjoy having someone grateful in your bed. The hurt that flickered across his face was answer enough, but he responded anyway. Do you want to know what I see when I look at you? I see a woman who walked toward danger to protect her child. I see someone who faced humiliation with dignity and didn't break. I see someone who questions my authority when she thinks I'm wrong, and who's never once asked me for anything she didn't earn. His hands cupped her face gently. I see the woman I want to wake up next to for the rest of my life. Not because you need me, but because I need you. Bruce, I love you, he said simply. Not your gratitude, not your desperation, not your circumstances. I love your strength, your intelligence, your fierce protectiveness of Emma. I love the way you challenge me, and the way you make me remember who I wanted to be before this life hardened me. Grazi felt tears threatening. I love you too, but I'm scared that people will always see me as someone who doesn't belong in your world. Then they don't know you the way I do. Bruce kissed her softly. And frankly, I don't care what people think as long as you know the truth. What truth? That you don't belong in my world. My world is better because you're in it. Later that evening, as they sat together on the cottage's front porch, while Emma played with her stuffed animals nearby, Grazi felt a sense of peace she'd never experienced before. This complicated, dangerous man loved her, not because she needed saving, but because he saw her worth. But peace in Bruce Salvatore's world was always temporary. Vincent appeared on the porch with his phone in hand, his expression grim. Boss, we've got a problem. Chicago PD just raided 3 of our business locations. They had federal warrants. Bruce's entire demeanor changed instantly, the gentle lover disappearing as the cold businessman took over. Casualties. No arrests, but they confiscated financial records, computer equipment, and client lists. This isn't a fishing expedition. They knew exactly what to look for. Someone talked, Bruce said quietly, and Grazi heard the deadly promise in his voice. That's what I'm thinking. But boss, there's something else. Vincent glanced at Grazi uncertainly. They specifically asked about household staff, about Miss Martinez. Bruce went completely still. Explain. The warrant included authorization to investigate anyone with access to your personal residence and business communications. They mentioned her by name. Grazi felt the world tilt around her. How would they even know who I am? Someone told them, Bruce said, his voice like winter ice. Someone with detailed knowledge of my personal life. Who would do that? Bruce and Vincent exchanged a look that communicated volumes. Vincent nodded once and headed back toward the main house, already making phone calls. Bruce, Grazi said urgently, what aren't you telling me? He turned to her with an expression she'd never seen before. Not anger, not determination, but something much more dangerous. Someone close to me has been feeding information to federal investigators. Someone with access to my home, my business, my personal life. How do you know? Because the only people who knew about our relationship, who knew you were living here with Emma, who knew the details they'd need to build their case. Bruce paused, his jaw tightening. Someone in my inner circle is a federal informant. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If they're investigating me, if they think I'm involved in your business, you're not going anywhere near federal custody, Bruce said with absolute certainty. I'll burn this entire city down before I let them use you to get to me. But as police sirens wailed in the distance and security lights began flashing around the estate's perimeter, Grazi realized that their peaceful evening, perhaps their peaceful life, was about to come to an abrupt end. Someone had betrayed them, and Bruce Salvatore was about to show everyone why betrayal was the one sin he never forgave. The war room that materialized in Bruce's study within an hour would have impressed military strategists. Maps of Chicago marked with business locations, surveillance photos of federal agents, and detailed dossiers on every member of Bruce's organization covered every available surface. Vincent, Tony, and 3 other men Grazi had never seen before worked with the efficiency of a special operations unit. Lockdown protocols are in effect, Vincent reported. All businesses closed, all personnel accounted for except who? Bruce's voice was deadly quiet. Marcus Romano. He's not answering his phone, and his apartment appears to have been abandoned quickly. Grazi knew that name. Marcus was Bruce's communications coordinator, a man who'd been with the organization for 8 years. Someone Bruce trusted implicitly. How long? Bruce asked. Unknown. Could be months, could be years. Tony spread out surveillance photos, but the timing of the raids, the specific intelligence they had, Marcus was in a position to provide all of it. Bruce studied the photos with the expression of a man planning a funeral. Assets? His accounts are empty as of 6 hours ago. Family relocated to witness protection last week, though we only discovered that this morning. So he's been planning this for a while, Bruce said calmly. Professional. Grazi watched this exchange with growing horror. These men were discussing Marcus's betrayal with the same detached efficiency they might use to plan a dinner party, but underneath their professional calm, she could sense the rage building. "Boss," Vincent said quietly, "there's something else. The federal investigation includes allegations about personal relationships being used to facilitate criminal enterprises." Bruce's eyes snapped to Vincent. "Meaning?" "Meaning they're suggesting that Miss Martinez isn't just a witness. They're painting her as an active participant who uses her household access to coordinate your business communications." The room went completely silent. Grazi felt as though ice water had been poured down her spine. "That's not true. I don't even know what half of your business involves." "Of course it's not true," Bruce said firmly. "But truth isn't the point. They're building a narrative that lets them pressure you for information about me." "What kind of pressure?" Tony answered grimly. "Federal prosecutors love flipping family members. They'll threaten you with conspiracy charges, accessory charges, money laundering, anything that carries serious prison time. Then they'll offer immunity in exchange for testimony against Bruce. But I don't know anything that could hurt him. You know his daily routines, his security protocols, his business associates' names and faces," Vincent explained. "You know when he meets with people and where. That's enough to build cases against half the organization." Bruce stood abruptly, his decision made. "We're leaving." "Leaving?" Grazi stared at him. "Where?" "I have properties outside federal jurisdiction. We'll relocate until this situation is resolved." "You mean until Marcus is dealt with?" she said quietly. Bruce's expression didn't change, but his silence was confirmation enough. "And after that? After you resolved the situation, what happens to us?" "We come home." "To what? A life where we're constantly looking over our shoulders? Where Emma grows up knowing her stepfather kills people who cross him?" The word stepfather hung in the air between them, unplanned but loaded with implication. Bruce's expression softened slightly. "Emma will grow up safe and loved," he said firmly. "That's all that matters." "No, it's not all that matters." Grazi stood to face him. "What matters is the kind of man she sees you as. What matters is whether she learns that problems are solved with violence or with integrity. Integrity doesn't stop federal prosecutors from destroying innocent people. And violence doesn't make you a man worth loving." The words hit Bruce like a physical blow. Around them, his men shifted uncomfortably, unused to seeing their boss challenged so directly. "You think I'm a monster," Bruce said quietly. "I think you're a good man who's convinced himself that terrible choices are the only ones available." Grazi moved closer to him. "I think you've been making decisions based on fear for so long that you've forgotten there might be another way." "What other way?" "Marcus betrayed everything I built, endangered everyone I protect, and painted the woman I love as a criminal. What would you have me do? File a complaint with Human Resources?" "I'd have you be the man Emma thinks you are. The man who reads bedtime stories and rescues stray cats and makes her feel safe without making other people afraid." Bruce stared at her for a long moment, something warring behind his eyes. "And if that man can't protect you, if being honorable means watching federal agents drag you away from Emma, then we face that together, as a family." Grazi, "No, Bruce. You said you loved me, not my gratitude or my desperation. Well, I'm not desperate anymore, and I'm not just grateful. I'm a woman who loves a man enough to fight for his soul." She moved to the desk and picked up one of the surveillance photos. "This Marcus. Where would he go? If you wanted to find him without violence, without threats, just to talk to him, where would he go?" Vincent answered before Bruce could stop him. "His sister owns a restaurant in Milwaukee, but boss, the man's under federal protection. Getting to him..." "Getting to him what?" "Getting to him would require the kind of action that proves every federal allegation about you." Grazi looked at Bruce directly. "Or getting to him might require the kind of creative thinking that solves problems without creating bigger ones." Bruce was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe Marcus didn't betray you because he wanted to hurt you. Maybe he betrayed you because someone convinced him it was the only way to protect his family." Grazi set down the photo. "I'm suggesting that a conversation might be more valuable than a body count. And if you're wrong, If Marcus is just another criminal who sold us out for money and immunity, then at least Emma won't grow up thinking the man she loves is a monster. The weight of that statement settled over the room like lead. Bruce's men were watching him carefully, waiting for orders that would determine not just Marcus's fate, but the kind of leader Bruce chose to be. "Vincent," Bruce said finally, "get me a secure phone number for Marcus's federal contact, and book 2 tickets to Milwaukee for tomorrow morning." "Boss, not for enforcement, for conversation." Bruce looked at Grazi with something like admiration. "Apparently I need to remember how to solve problems like the man Emma thinks I am." But as they prepared for what might be the most important negotiation of Bruce's life, none of them noticed the surveillance van that had been parked outside the estate's gates for the past 3 hours, or the federal agents who were already moving to ensure that Marcus Romano would never have the chance to explain his betrayal to anyone. The flight to Milwaukee was tense with unspoken possibilities. Bruce had left his security detail behind, except for Vincent, a calculated risk that demonstrated his commitment to handling this situation differently than he normally would. But Grazi could see the cost of that choice in the tight lines around his eyes and the way his hands remained constantly alert, ready to reach for weapons he'd chosen not to carry. "Tell me about Marcus," she said, as they descended through the clouds toward Milwaukee's airport. "Before all this, what was he like?" Bruce was quiet for a moment, staring out the small plane's window. Loyal, smart, family-oriented, talked about his sister's kids constantly, sent them to private schools, paid for his parents' medical care. He paused. "He reminded me of myself at that age, before I learned that loyalty is a luxury most people can't afford." "So, what changed?" "Fear," Bruce said simply. "Fear makes people do things they never thought they were capable of." They landed at a small private airfield where a rental car waited for them. The drive to Marcus's sister's restaurant took 45 minutes through suburbs that reminded Grazi of the neighborhood where she'd grown up, working class, proud, holding on to the American dream with both hands. Romano's family kitchen was exactly what she'd expected. Red checkered tablecloths, the smell of garlic and fresh bread, family photos covering every available wall space. It was the kind of place where recipes passed from generation to generation, and everyone knew each other's names. Marcus was washing dishes in the back when they found him. He looked up as Bruce entered the kitchen, and for a moment, pure terror flashed across his face. But Bruce had come here to talk, not to threaten, and something in his demeanor communicated that. "Hello, Marcus." "Bruce." Marcus set down the plate he'd been washing with trembling hands. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I imagine not." Bruce pulled out a chair at the small employee table. "Sit down, we need to talk." "My sister doesn't know anything," Marcus said quickly. "She's not involved in any of this." "I know. This is between you and me." Grazi stayed near the kitchen door, watching both men carefully. Marcus looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past few weeks. Hollow-eyed, nervous, jumping at every sound from the dining room beyond. "Why?" Bruce asked simply. Marcus's composure cracked. "They had everything, Bruce. Photos of my kids going to school, records of every conversation I'd ever had with you, financial records going back to my first day working for you." His voice broke. "They said I could either cooperate or watch my family go to prison for money laundering, conspiracy, accessory charges. So you gave them everything." "I gave them enough to make the case they were going to make anyway." Marcus looked up with desperate eyes. "Bruce, they already knew about the businesses. The money flows, the meetings. All I did was confirm details they already had." "And Grazi? Why did you give them information about her?" Marcus glanced at Grazi with obvious shame. "They said she was already under investigation. Said they suspected she was your communications coordinator, that she was using her household position to facilitate criminal enterprise." He swallowed hard. "I told them the truth, that she didn't know anything, that she was just trying to take care of her kid. But they said if I didn't cooperate fully, they'd arrest her anyway and let the courts sort it out." The pieces clicked into place for Grazi. "You were trying to protect me." "I was trying to protect everyone," Marcus said quietly. "My family, your family, even Bruce in a way. They were going to move against the organization regardless. At least this way, some of us might survive it." Bruce studied Marcus's face for a long moment. "How long do you have before they expect your next report?" "They want me to call in tonight, but Bruce, you need to know they're planning something big. Multiple agencies, coordinated raids, federal marshals." Marcus's voice grew urgent. "They're going to move against everyone connected to you within the next 48 hours. including Grazi, especially Grazi. They think she's the key to proving personal involvement in criminal enterprise. They think if they can flip her, they can destroy everything I've built, Bruce finished quietly. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them. Outside, the lunch rush was beginning, and they could hear the cheerful sounds of families sharing meals. A normal world that felt very far away from the one they were navigating. "What do you want me to do?" Marcus asked finally. Bruce looked at Grazi, something passing between them that Marcus couldn't interpret. "What do you think he should do?" It took Grazi a moment to realize Bruce was genuinely asking for her input on a decision that could affect dozens of lives. "I think Marcus should tell you everything he knows about their operation, their timeline, their evidence." She paused. "And then I think he should disappear somewhere the federal government will never find him, and his family should disappear with him." She looked at Marcus directly. "You made the best choice you could in an impossible situation, but now you need to make a different choice." Marcus stared at her in confusion. "I don't understand." Bruce's phone rang. Vincent's number. "Go ahead," Bruce answered. "Boss, we have a problem. Federal marshals just surrounded the estate. They've got arrest warrants for you and Miss Martinez. They're moving now." Bruce's expression went cold. "How many?" 30+ agents. Multiple agencies. They came prepared for a war. Bruce hung up and looked at Grazi with something like admiration. "You were right about talking instead of shooting, but it looks like the federal government prefers the shooting option." "What does that mean?" "It means we're not going home tonight." Bruce stood and extended his hand to Marcus. "It means your cooperation ends right here, and your new life begins wherever you want it to begin." "Bruce, I can't just—" "Yes, you can. Take your family and disappear. I'll handle the federal government." "How?" Bruce smiled, and for the first time in weeks it was the smile of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. "By giving them something they want more than revenge." As they prepared to leave the restaurant through the back exit, Grazi realized that everything was about to change again. But this time, instead of running from the federal investigation, Bruce was apparently planning to walk directly into it. The question was whether he had a plan that didn't end with all of them in federal prison. The federal courthouse in Chicago was a fortress of marble and steel that had seen the prosecution of everyone from political corruption cases to organized crime kingpins. As Bruce's sedan pulled up to the main entrance 3 hours later, Grazi counted at least 20 federal agents positioned around the building's perimeter. "This is insane," she said for the 10th time since Bruce had explained his plan during the flight back from Milwaukee. "You can't just walk into a federal investigation and negotiate your way out." "Watch me," Bruce said calmly, straightening his tie with the same care he'd used before a business dinner. Vincent turned from the front seat. "Boss, it's not too late to reconsider. We can still get you out of the country, set you up somewhere without extradition treaties. And leave Grazi to face conspiracy charges alone? Leave Emma to grow up thinking her mother is a criminal." Bruce shook his head. "Some things are worth more than freedom." "Bruce," Grazi's voice was thick with emotion, "if this goes wrong, then you'll take Emma and start over somewhere safe. Vincent has instructions and resources to make that happen." Bruce took her hand. "But it's not going to go wrong. How can you be so confident?" Bruce's smile was sharp and dangerous. "Because I'm not going in there as a defendant. I'm going in there as someone with information they need more than they need another conviction." The federal prosecutor who met them in the courthouse lobby was exactly what Grazi had expected. Middle-aged, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from a career built on destroying powerful men. Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Chen introduced herself with professional courtesy that couldn't quite mask her obvious satisfaction at having Bruce Salvatore voluntarily surrender. "Mr. Salvatore, I have to say, I'm surprised to see you here without an army of defense attorneys. I prefer to handle important negotiations personally," Bruce replied smoothly. "I believe you want to discuss terms." "Terms? You're facing federal charges for racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy, and about 15 other felonies. The only terms I'm interested in discussing are your guilty plea and cooperation agreement." "I'm afraid you misunderstand the situation," Bruce said with the same calm he'd used to correct a dinner seating arrangement. "You're not prosecuting me for those crimes. You're investigating a human trafficking operation that's been using my legitimate businesses as cover without my knowledge." Prosecutor Chen's confidence flickered slightly. "I'm sorry?" Marcus Romano came to me 3 weeks ago with evidence that someone in my organization was facilitating international human trafficking through our shipping and transportation companies. Bruce handed her a thick folder. These are the financial records, communication logs, and shipping manifests that prove systematic criminal activity. Grazi watched this performance with amazement. Bruce was completely rewriting the narrative, transforming himself from criminal mastermind to concerned citizen reporting criminal activity. Mr. Salvatore, are you seriously trying to tell me that you were unaware of criminal activity in your own organization? I'm telling you that I was the victim of criminal activity in my organization, and that I've been conducting my own investigation to identify the perpetrators and gather evidence for federal prosecution. Bruce opened the folder and spread documents across the conference table. 6 months of shipping records showing falsified manifests, financial transfers that don't appear in official business accounts, communication logs between my employees and contacts in Eastern Europe that I was never made aware of. Grazi recognized some of the documents. She'd seen Bruce's men working on them during late-night meetings she'd thought were about legitimate business problems. Apparently, those meetings had been about building this exact case. These documents suggest someone in your organization was running a trafficking operation worth millions of dollars annually, Prosecutor Chen said, studying the papers with obvious interest. Someone who had access to my businesses, my accounts, and my trust, Bruce agreed. Someone who's now in federal custody and presumably willing to testify about the true scope of this operation in exchange for immunity. Marcus Romano. Marcus Romano has been feeding you information about my personal life while systematically stealing from my businesses and using them to commit federal crimes. Bruce's voice carried just the right amount of betrayed outrage. I believe that constitutes fraud, theft, and using federal resources to facilitate criminal enterprise. The room was quiet for a long moment while Prosecutor Chen processed this reversal. Grazi could see her mental calculations. A corruption case against a known organized crime figure versus a human trafficking case with international implications and political value. What are you proposing, Mr. Salvatore? I'm proposing that I provide the federal government with complete access to my businesses, my financial records, and my cooperation in building cases against the actual criminals who've been using my organization as cover. Bruce leaned back in his chair. In exchange, my businesses continue operating under federal oversight, and my personal life remains private. And Miss Martinez? Miss Martinez is my household manager and the mother of my goddaughter. She has no connection to any criminal activity, and suggesting otherwise would constitute prosecutorial misconduct. Prosecutor Chen studied Grazi with obvious disappointment. It was clear she'd been hoping to use her as leverage against Bruce. Mr. Salvatore, even if I accept your version of events, you're still running an organization with documented connections to organized crime. I'm running legitimate businesses that employ 300 people in Chicago alone. I pay taxes, maintain proper licenses, and comply with all applicable regulations. Bruce's tone became businesslike. Any previous irregularities were the result of criminal infiltration, not criminal leadership. You expect me to believe you've been running a completely legal operation? I expect you to prove otherwise using evidence that wasn't obtained through the criminal activities of a federal informant. Bruce smiled coldly. Good luck with that. The negotiation continued for 3 hours, with federal prosecutors gradually realizing that their case against Bruce had been built on information provided by someone who was now revealed to be a criminal himself. The human trafficking evidence, however, was solid gold, the kind of case that made careers and generated headlines about fighting international crime. When they finally emerged from the courthouse, the sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Vincent was waiting with the car, and Emma was visible through the bulletproof windows, asleep in the back seat. Is it over? Grazi asked as they drove away from downtown. The investigation is over. The federal oversight will continue for the next 3 years, but my businesses will operate normally. Bruce pulled her closer to him. We can go home. And Marcus? Marcus and his family are starting new lives somewhere very far from here. The federal government has bigger cases to build with the evidence I provided. Grazi studied his face in the passing streetlights. You planned this from the beginning, didn't you? The evidence, the trafficking case, the way to turn their investigation around on them. I planned for the possibility, Bruce admitted. In my business, You always need an exit strategy that doesn't involve running or shooting. But you risked everything. If they hadn't accepted your story, then we would have faced the consequences together, like you said. Bruce kissed her softly, like family. As they pulled through the estate's gates, Grazi saw that the federal agents were gone, the security lights were back to normal, and home looked exactly as they'd left it. Emma woke up as Vincent parked the car, immediately reaching for Bruce with sleepy arms. "Mr. Bruce, did you catch the bad guys?" "We caught the bad guys," Bruce confirmed solemnly. "And now we're all safe." "Forever and ever?" Bruce looked at Grazi over Emma's head, his expression full of love and promise, and the quiet confidence of a man who'd fought for everything that mattered to him. "Forever and ever," he said. 6 months later, Bruce Salvatore and Grazi Martinez were married in the garden behind the estate, with Emma as flower girl and half of Chicago's legitimate business community in attendance. The federal oversight of Bruce's companies had turned up nothing but proper business practices, and the human trafficking prosecutions had become a model for international law enforcement cooperation. But most importantly, Emma had a father who read her bedtime stories, helped with homework, and taught her that the strongest people were the ones who protected others without hurting anyone in the process. And Grazi had found something she'd never dared hope for. A man who'd chosen love over power, family over fear, and a future over the shadows of his past. Sometimes the most dangerous men were the ones who had the most to lose. And sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy was to refuse to become one yourself. As Bruce spun Emma around the dance floor at their wedding reception, while Grazi watched from Bruce's arms, she realized that fairy tales weren't just for children. Sometimes they were for single mothers who dared to believe that powerful men could choose to use their power for love instead of fear. And sometimes, just sometimes, they all lived happily ever after,